We are live.
Welcome everybody to the regular meeting of the East Hampton Town Trustees for May 10th. And I'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Allison, can you do roll call, please?
Surely. John Aldrich.
Here.
Francis Bach.
Here.
Ben Dollinger. Rick Drew.
Here.
Tim Garneau.
Here.
Jim Grimes.
Yes.
Susan McGraw-Keeber, she's out. Mike Martinson.
Here.
And Tim, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, Bill Taylor. I don't know why I said Tim. I don't see him. Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Bach, if you could permit, I just have someone in the waiting room coming in by just a phone number. Do you want that number or do you want me to just let them in?
I would say let them in.
Okay.
All right. Move on to public comment. We have Lori McCarver here. Lori, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. And you want to speak about the Promised Land Kelp Company
Well,
and
yeah.
request to cultivate in trustee waters.
Mm-hmm. Did you get the new paperwork I sent to John?
Yeah, I believe he sent it to all the board members.
Okay, good.
I did.
That answered, it was kind of based on the questions that Mr. Grimes had last week.
Okay.
So it outlined the time period. First off, it's the first paragraph. It states that, this, as we mentioned, Mr. Taylor brought up last week, was that we're not looking for financial aid from the trustees or from the town in this project. This is a for-profit company, and we are personally funding, and we have investors. So that's the first thing, that we're not looking for funding. It's not a research program. Hey, Barley. Did you get the new paperwork I sent to John?
I didn't send anything to Barley.
That's okay. He has it.
Okay.
I sent it to Barley from me. And then the first question was about time period. And that is a big point here about being in the water off season from our regular active season. So we're in the water approximately November or December into April, maybe the first weeks of May. And then Mr. Grime asked about areas, and that's where we attach the maps, and we put some blue blocks in the areas that we're interested in.
Lori, I had a question about that. Are you requesting all those areas, one of those areas, some of those areas?
Yeah, I'd love all of them. I'm going to say that. But it all depends on, we're only testing these areas. They're test pilots. So you're not going to find, 50 strings in each area. As we noted in the layout, it's probably 1 to 3 strings in each area. And I'm putting them out there for us to think that those are the best spots for water depth and tidal reasons.
Okay. Has everybody seen the maps of the areas? I can put them on the screen.
No, I see them all, John. Thank you. Some of them are located in areas of historic shellfishing activity. So there are definitely some potential conflicts with these sites. So I do think we need to consider input from other user groups on this. Lori, you're looking to do something in the fall, winter timeframe. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my question is, when you say historic shellfishing site.
Yeah, well, like, about 5 years ago, there was a big set of bay scallops in Napeague Harbor where your big center box is right in the middle of the harbor.
Uh-huh.
So that's a place that has been successful in the not too distant past. And, guys were treading, diving, and dredging right in that area. And a lot of scallops were harvested there. In the southwest corner, I think Barley has seeded scallops there historically, maybe a little outside of that. And I know that, there's been a lot of steamering activity in there historically as well. So I just think in fairness, this is a lot of public bottomland that, we should consider, the user groups that have been working these areas so that we don't have conflict. One of the other proposals before us right now is the soft clam powering season, which isn't a seasonal conflict potentially, but in terms of the area of use is something that is being considered. So, the reason I ask your time frame is we have some time to get public comment on this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think something, that is using a public resource should have input from the other user groups.
I just interject real quick.
Hey, Barley.
Hi, I just want to let you know that Nat Miller had a hand in delineating those areas on the maps as well. So, and your point of seeding scallops in Southwest Napeague, we do. And that doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't be used for other things, because if it were, it could act as a quasi sanctuary, which is kind of what we're shooting for. And we tried that, if you remember, and it got raided. So we do seed there, and we don't mark it because marking attracts people. So
Sure.
I wouldn't necessarily say, to put that off limits because of that reason. So it would, like I said, it could act as a quasi sanctuary if other users were to use that area.
Right. No, I think there's definitely an opportunity to have kelp and shellfish kind of go hand in hand. It may enhance the habitat of the bottomland, which would be a wonderful side benefit of this. So, I think it's definitely worth us exploring. I just want to make sure that the other user groups are being considered. And I'm glad that you're involved, Barley, because, you obviously have a big hand in laying this out and all the great work you're doing with the hatchery. So thank you for participating. And, Lori, I think it was really smart of you to bring Barley in now. And, I think we can structure something to get, additional public comment. I'm glad Nat's involved. Obviously, he's got a very, very knowledgeable perspective. But, again, it's a lot of public area we're talking about. So I just think there's a little more homework to be done. But, it's certainly something the trustees should be considering.
Yeah, this sounds like a good thing. It's very much like letting people use public bottom for fish traps and pound nets. Yeah, you're not considering doing everything at once. You're going to try all those areas to see what works, is my assumption.
We don't, this is still a test run. We don't even know.
Hey, Lori, do you have some understanding of what your capacity is to manage the areas that you're laying out here?
Yeah.
I don't know how much after set maintenance is required on these areas, or how much time is required for harvesting, or even setting these areas out. Is there some sort of battle plan established here, or is this going to be a like learn as you go type thing in terms of?
I'm good friends with Paul Dobbins, who is a 20-year kelp farmer, actually, from
Okay,
Maine.
so you got some idea of the manpower requirements.
Yeah, and Paul also is the head of the kelp program for the WWF, and he wrote you guys a letter, and he's been working with us. I'm heading up to Maine the second week in June with Nat, and we're going to go through their farms to see what happens after they've harvested and how they leave their, because right now they're in the middle of their harvest, and we couldn't get up there in time. But I've been working with him for about a year now, And he's been showing me the plans and the setups and the timeframes, and Nat has been communicating with him regularly. So we do have a person that's been doing this for many, many years.
Now, Barley, what is your involvement here as a consultant, or are you financially invested in this?
No, I'm just an advisor, just kind of the local on the ground liaison, if you will. You know, because we're not entirely sure how the stuff's going to grow here. You know, the poster child is really Paul McCormick's farm in Mauritius, which is performing extremely well. And then there's areas in the Peconics that aren't really performing up to where they were expected. So part of the reason we wanted to do these pilots is to just figure out where the stuff grows.
Hey, Barley, just from a personal perspective, doing a lot of fishing in the area, you see kelp, Chagwam Reef, you see kelp at Cerebra Shoals. I haven't seen a lot of kelp really west of there in shallower water. So my experience is that it seems to do pretty well. And you'll see some along the south side of Montauk, off some of the rocky peninsulas there. But, you know, usually it's like 15 to maybe 30 feet of water. This is a much kind of shallower application. The Mauritius application, the main applications where these are being successfully farmed, any feedback on water depth there or different techniques that are enabling shallower water cultivation to take place?
Well, that's where Mauritius comes in, because his spot there is literally about hip deep. So, you know, for years there, the common thought was deep water, rough water with a certain amount of flow is what kelp liked to grow in. So Mauritius kind of spun that on its head. And the stuff, I don't know if you've seen any pictures, but the stuff is gorgeous. It's, you know, 6 inches wide and 6 feet long. So
there's a story on that in Newsday yesterday.
Yeah, it's been great. So
now, is that really, hey, Barley, is that a case where they've got cooler temperatures there, or?
I don't think they would. I think, you know, part of it is the nitrogen. There's a fair amount of nitrogen in there. I don't think they necessarily have cooler temperatures because, you know, it's just like our embayments. They aren't necessarily cooler or warmer than any of the other surrounding waters. If anything, I would imagine it might be a hair warmer. But I think a lot of it is the nitrogen influx that he gets there. So one of the things that we'll learn, you know, as you know, the hatchery's doing some down at the head of the harbor. So I'm interested to see how it does on a muddy bottom. You know, that might have some effect. Because everybody thought the kelp would just kind of scour on a sandy bottom and not grow. And that's what Mauritius is like. And it's doing great.
My kelp in Montauk is growing fine, and that's in about 7 feet of water over mud. And it had a really slow start. Looked like zero right through to February. And then in the last 2 months, it's been taking off and looking really good. Probably 18 inches.
How's it taste?
It tastes like sushi. Yeah. So, you know, I think all of the water bodies have good potential. I think 3 Mile Harbor is your best bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be good to see what water bodies actually do. If this becomes successful, what size of a plot would you need to be commercially viable?
Well, I'm not specific. I mean, we're working with Suffolk County as well for some of the leases through Suffolk County. So I'm not specifically just counting on it only being through in you know, trustee water land. I can't answer that yet because we're just still testing to see where it's going to be. Each place is going to be different.
You seem to have worked out a way of marketing this stuff, which seems really good. I mean, that's always been.
Well, yeah, the whole.
Make money off this. You know?
Yeah, the kelp came to me through my aromatherapy business. So my products, I have products that I put kelp in, and I was buying the kelp from Maine. So after a couple of years, I just started talking to Nat about it and asked him if he was interested in researching it with me. I've known Nat since he was a kid. So we decided to look into it further and then started connecting with all these growers. Bryn Smith, that's in Connecticut, up in the Thimble Islands, has the largest amount of kelp farming there. And then we met with Paul Dobbins, and he's just been incredible.
Lori, go ahead, though. Go ahead.
Everybody has been basically been coming to us for money. Now it seems like people want to do this and be self-supporting, and the nitrogen removal will be sort of a lucrative, just a byproduct for us, not the main objective.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Lori, are there thresholds for your product being able to be used based on nitrogen? Or is this going to be an edible product or a cosmetics product line? Because if nitrogen is an issue, how does that impact you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because you're either drying it, cooking it. It dissipates when you blanch it. But I don't have. It depends on what we're going to be doing with it. That's it. You know, it really depends. Then some of the cosmetics, you actually only use the water, so that you blanch it with. And then there's fertilizer that they're using the kelp dried. Flakes, powders, it depends on what you make with it.
Thank you.
Lori, in your long range projection here, if you were to get all these areas and look at them on a pilot basis, what is your long range thought here? I mean, would you basically pick one and try to, do your final project on one site, or several? What have been your thoughts along?
Well, talking to these guys about the areas, I think we have to find out which one the kelp grows in. And then if that's the area that it grows the best, that's the area we'd like to continue with for, long term. But I don't know, we don't have that answer because it hasn't been done yet.
So your thought is you would pick one site ultimately?
Ultimately.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, we have to test it. Like Barley said, there's some places that haven't been growing well. So we need to know if we're going to put up 3 strings in different areas and find out there's one area that it grows, then I'd like to concentrate on that area.
And when you think of your ultimate plan, understanding that you are also looking at other sites in the Bay, what's your idea of about how much acreage you would be looking for in a town harbor?
Oh, I don't really. Barley, what do you think is size-wise? I mean,
I figured that would be limited by what you would want to give, whether it was 3-acre, 5-acre, 10-acre plots. I think they'd probably want to go from there, determined by whatever kind of space you guys wanted to relinquish. We have no idea, or they have, nobody has any idea how much space you're willing to allocate. So
well, I think
if it was going to be an order of few acre plots, then.
Yeah, I can understand your thinking on that, but I think my thought is maybe we have to work back and forth. I mean, if it gets to this point, let me just qualify that. Might have to work a little bit back and forth, and because we kind of need to know what's commercially viable. I mean, we wouldn't want to say, well, half an acre, that's it, and you'd say, well, I'd need at least an acre to make it commercially viable. So
I'd say off the top of my head, at least 5. Even if we went with the county model of 10, I don't think necessarily anything more than 10. But don't quote me on that. as we learn more from the folks that are doing it in other areas, but and it also depends on how it grows here in regard to spacing. If they can be spaced out if lines can be 5 feet apart or 10 feet apart, or they have to be 20, that kind of changes things too. That's going to change your output per acre. But like I said, it's really contingent on what
So for this year, you're looking for 1 or 2 lines at each spot?
Yeah, the idea was like three 100-foot lines, just to have some sort of replication.
Yeah.
I think 3 would be kind of a minimum.
I
Okay,
did 2 100-foot lines 100 feet apart on my farm. That's what I did for a test this year.
Yeah, in the Peconics, we did 3 100-footers about 20 feet apart. And let me also qualify that the Peconics were, because it was the first year and permitting was a little slow, the areas were seeded relatively late. So that might have had something to do with it too. They didn't get that initial nitrogen bump. So we'll learn more there next year.
When did they go in?
December, I want to say late December.
Same, yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was all delayed from permitting.
What are your thoughts on, how many seasons you might be interested in, investigating growing conditions in different areas? I mean, I would think one season you might not be, might not be enough time to say, well, this is ultimately the spot we would want to pick. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, at the same time is of the essence. If one site proves to be, heads, tails above the other ones, I think they want to kind of, in a way, go all in, because it's kind of a hot time for this stuff right now, and you don't want to be behind the 8 ball.
yeah. Hey, guys, in order to, this is one of those things. I think to ask Lori or Barley to give a hard, fast prospectus on this right now is probably a reach, because there's a lot of questions. I think perhaps if we're going to support this, we don't necessarily need to go all in here. We can do this like we've done some research projects and issue a 1-year permit for the various areas that they're discussing. And at the end of that year, listen, it's only a 1-year permit. They'll have to come back to us. And I think at that point, I would hope that Barley, you and Lori could have this fleshed out to a point that we actually can quantify the size of the areas, the actual location of the areas, and based on a season's performance, I would hope, like any crop, that you'd get some understanding of the sort of spacing allowances you can work with, because like I'm assuming, listen, I don't know shit about kelp, okay, but I do know about growing plants. There's optimal spacing to give the greatest per square foot yield that you can come up with, and sometimes that's a guessing game. You've got to feel that out, and it sounds like you're in that situation here. Every crop is a little bit different, and until you've dialed in a protocol that is working, I think we've got to be willing to give some latitude and some flexibility here on a season, and then perhaps that may drip into another season, but we'll have the opportunity to review this. I don't know, how's that sound to the group?
I mean, in principle, it sounds good. I mean, there are, a lot of other, user groups that we should let weigh in. So I would be a fan of, or support some form of a public comment period before we would vote on issuing a permit. In principle, I think it's a great project and we should strongly consider it. But, there are other user groups, particularly like in Napeed, you have a lot of windsurfers. I could see guys slicing up these lines and stuff if they're out in the middle of the harbor. So, I think we just need to hear from other people that are users.
We've essentially got until September next year, August to September of 21 to put this to rest. I think there's plenty of time for us to notice this, have an open forum on it, get some input, and much like other projects. If we're gonna step behind this in some way, we're gonna take a bit of risk ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. We certainly have to have public input here. My suggestion would be that maybe the Aquaculture Committee get together with, the participants here and kind of try to put together, a hard and fast kind of proposal. This is exactly where we want it. This is how large an area we want, for how long. And, then maybe once those definitions are in place, come back and, put it on a schedule for public hearing. And before then we finally make a decision after all that.
That makes sense, John. I would support this going to committee with the Aquaculture Committee.
Okay.
Is this something that requires a motion?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to send this to the Aquaculture Committee for review and representation to the board.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
All righty.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Lori.
Lori.
Very
Okay,
much, Lori.
thank you.
Lori.
Thank you, John. Okay. See, is there anybody else waiting for public comment?
No, excuse me, no, there are no callers on the phone.
Okay. We'll move on to new business. 2021 Horseshoe Crab Monitoring Program. Does anybody?
I can take that. We're hopefully getting back into this for another year. We're finding ourselves far below the public participation that we had 2 years ago. I think a lot of that has to do with COVID. Actually, the first count was last night. We didn't have the best of weather. I don't know how they made out over in Northwest. There really wasn't much happening in Napeague. New moon is tomorrow night. That's another count night. And then Thursday night is the last count night. And we've all got plenty of tags. Hopefully it's a good horseshoe crab season. We can collect some reasonable data and tag a number of horseshoe crabs.
So who from the board is participating this year?
From our board,
I am.
myself,
Yes.
Tim Garneau, and Susan. John, I believe, too.
Yeah, me. Yeah, Tim is doing Northwest County Park, and I'm doing Mile Hill Road.
Okay. Hey, Tim, you had dropped off what you thought were tags for us in Napeague. I have 2 sheets of tags in my bag. So that
Oh, wow. So we got
that sheet
each.
was
I'll
actually
get
meant for you guys.
back. Okay. I thought it said Napeague on there as well.
I know,
so,
it actually
I
said
thought I had
Napeague
gotten 2.
and-
So Jim, I'll get that other set.
Yeah. Yeah, but I've got plenty in my bag, so we're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, we saw only, my wife and I counted last night, and we only saw 6. And John, what did you see?
13. What'd you see, Jim?
All right, well, the water's gonna get warmer, and then we could get into, maybe the next cycle, we might get up to 80 or 90 in the night. So there's a lot ahead of us.
Yeah, I put together the information from the Northwest sites, and it's pretty consistent that the next moon cycle, the late May cycle, is going to be the high count. And it drops off pretty precipitously after that. So I'm not sure that's what you've seen in Napeague as well, Jim, but.
It's funny. We've had, like last night, there was too much wind. The water was
Pouring
pretty
rain.
choppy. And, it was dead. It was dead. But,
It was cold during the week too.
yeah, but you know what?
Been cold.
Tomorrow night looks good. And that whole thing can switch around. And we've had it where you think that either the new moon or the full moon is really going to be the high count night. We've had it on the 2 nights before before the full or new moon. We've had it on the waning side of it as well. So it's a hard thing to call, which is why we have to go out with the frequency we do. I'm hoping the water clarity improves. I want to take some pictures.
Sounds good.
All right. Anything else on that?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So we'll move on to old business, I guess. Staggering of trustee elections. I think I'm supposed to update you on that one. Apparently, the way this has been presented by Fred Thiel, it's going under something called home rule. And that apparently requires an approval from the town board. I've been in touch with the town board. That doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue. If we wanted to, we could skirt that and start over again and go a different route without including a town approval. But, we're so far into it at this point. And if there's not going to be an issue, we're better off just continuing the way we are.
Yeah, I think the staggered terms are in our community's best interest. So I would like to think our town board would support us. So I think you're on the right track, Francis.
Yeah, I don't anticipate a problem there.
Do you know how this has been handled in the past when something's changed with the electoral process?
Well,
Apparently the same way.
what happened is the reason this is falling into that home rule is because the last time we changed the number of trustees, that's the path it took. And really what's happening here is the Fred's office just looked at past history. And even though Dan, I believe, had counseled that it really didn't necessarily fall under the heading of home rule. The fact that it was done that way before is why they're continuing down that road now. And as long as we get what we're looking for, I don't see a reason necessarily to try and reinvent the wheel here.
No, the end result will be the same. So
I think the concern is the idea of setting a precedent that we might not want to set for future purposes. I'm wondering, Jim, if Dan might have some insight into obtaining a response from the town board, which sort of clarifies that we really don't quite need their approval, but maybe their support.
A letter of support. That's, yeah. I think that's the direction that we discussed.
Great. That way we're not setting some sort of precedent that under this home rule where we require their approval. So yeah, maybe we'll take a look at the way it's worded just to make sure we don't set that precedent. But
take a look at how it was done last time, because I believe somebody sent that out last week.
The reason we're doing it this way is because of the way they did it last time.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know whether it boxes us in for the future, but the current board was set up, by the legislature.
Well, I think Bill, as long as there isn't language in there that dictates this, I hope that isn't the case.
Yeah, with Dan, they sent all the papers out. Fred's office is doing good. We've been talking about staggering these terms for a long time, and this looks like it's going to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I mean, really at this point, we're just talking about procedure. So as far as the meats and bones of this thing, I had to look at it as well. And for the public and for the trustees, we're there. We really, it's been sent through the Assembly by Fred Thiel, through the Senate by Senator Palumbo, and it calls the start in 2023, the next elections for the 5 and then the 4. So you guys have done a great job, and certainly the meat and bones of what we're trying to accomplish is there. So it looks good.
Okay. Move on to committee reports. We have beaches. A request from InterSigns to close out trustee permit B 1-21 issued to 85 West End Road.
Yes,
Suffolk.
I think there should be two of them here, 85 and 93.
Correct.
Okay, I've been down and looked at both of them. They're in good order. They did send supporting photographs along with this, and I think we're in good shape.
So you want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we close these out.
Second.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. All right, harbor management. I sent out an email today. I hope everybody got a chance to see that.
Yeah, Francis, I did. And
Okay.
I don't see the huge discrepancy from the original resolution until today. I'm going to go back 7 years where I think Diane was the clerk and Nat and Sean were on the committee working on mooring grids, duck blinds, helping the town a little bit with dredging. The trustees weren't as strong administratively then, and they kind of lost some permits. And it became clear that Natural Resources had a pretty good handle on navigational dredging with Kim Shaw as the administrator for our town. And we're consulted with from time to time. But the real need that took place when your brother and Tom Noble and some other people were on the board, they kind of already took care of that heavy lifting. And it became clear to, I think, this board that environmental dredging of some of the smaller water bodies wasn't really on the radar for Natural Resources. So we see Fresh Pond, we see Hog Creek, we see Little Northwest Creek, and possibly a bigger project on Napeague really falling into more of the trustees' purview. And we've provided a lot of leadership over the past 6 years. We've maintained the role of the duck blind program management. We did the survey. We documented on the GIS system. We go out and do the site visits to make sure the blinds are taken out or notify the people if they don't.
That's
Don's
bullshit.
done some great work on the mooring grid program, working with some of the marina operators. So that spirit and everything has kept moving forward. There's also been some specific projects where it was a little bit over the committee's head. And we saw that with Hog Creek, and the Harbor Management Committee volunteered to help. And we've developed a great relationship with the homeowners associations around Hog Creek. And that was Jim, John, and I doing some heavy lifting with some difficult negotiations. And we've set forth some really great protocols and have a great working relationship. So I think there's a lot of good that's come out of the Harbor Management Committee. I think technically you're right, the resolution isn't written quite as it should be for the modern day focus. But 20 years later, if you look at the write-up on our website for the Harbor Management Committee, which was just published by your committee, the website committee, it's not that different. Technically you're right. The resolution should be rewritten, but there are areas where it gets a little tricky, and the group that's on there now has brought some good expertise and handled some difficult situations. Now like powering came up, we volunteered to help. The fueling issue came up. These were hot potato issues. Everyone wasn't jumping at these to take them on. And I think we've done a really good job with these issues. So,
But Rick, I think you're misunderstanding my concern on what it is. The committee was set up to be a hybrid of a citizens advisory committee.
right.
The way it is now, that there is no citizen membership, and the resolution also calls for a town board liaison.
Right.
So
Well, right.
that's my concern. And
Right, the
these issues that you're talking about really are important. And I think having the citizen portion of it really helps in understanding how the public would feel about these issues, and especially with what's coming on now. Like we talked tonight, we talked about the kelp. It would be great to have 3 people on that board who could give their thoughts on the whole thing.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more, but what we've seen is the dynamic of participation changing, where we're dealing with homeowner associations. We look at Hog Creek. We're interfacing with the board presidents on those projects. They have very strong boards that we're dealing with, and their input is powerful and well received by us. The same thing with Little Northwest Creek. It's 3 homeowners associations representing 500 families that we're negotiating with and talking with and working with to help them steer these projects in. So there's a lot of community involvement, but it's just a different format. And I'll go back to, I think that things are evolving and changing.
But so the question is, do we want to restructure how this committee is put in place?
Hey, Francis, I'm not sure this is a matter of restructuring how the committee is put in place. I do agree on the evolution of this thing. And clearly, since I've been on the Harbor Management Committee, we had some members of the community that were involved in it for a period of time, and they didn't really feel like we were doing much. And quite frankly, we were not doing much, because what eclipsed every committee during that period were the negotiations and the discussion and the dialogue related to deep water. Okay. Once we began to move past that, what we have seen, and it started with Little Northwest Creek, is where the citizen participation, or the participants, really were a revolving door. Little Northwest Creek, we had the Azurist, Nineveh communities, Sag Harbor Hills that came to us. We spoke with them. We helped organize their project. We did the permitting under our names. There was some financial participation on their part. And we're just getting ready, actually, to duplicate that with Hog Creek. What I do very much agree is, so that we sort of have a little more unity here, I think we really should have some liaison or somebody from the town board participating in this, because one of the things that is pretty clear is we do find ourselves on a fairly consistent basis, either not looping natural resources into the discussion, or vice versa, them not looping us into a discussion. And I think more work can be done along those lines. And that said, John and I have a meeting tomorrow, which I think begins to start to address that.
Okay, so clearly, the previous board that set up this committee felt that this was so important that it was created by resolution. Are we supposed to work against that resolution, or are we supposed to have it resolved that we're going to set it up a different way, where we're not going to have appointed civilians to the board, but the committee will work directly with like property association groups, as you said?
Well, that, Francis, I think, I don't know whether there's a way to satisfy.
I mean, otherwise it's just what Jim. Otherwise, it's just another committee that's appointed by the clerk, and it's no different than any other committee. And we could do that too. But I think because this was put together by resolution, we would have to dissolve it by resolution to be something else.
Do you think?
That's all I'm saying. I think it's very important to have. I really do. I don't want to see it go.
As clerk, do you think that the Harbor Management Committee has morphed far enough away from its original intention that it requires a restructure, or do you think that the committee should become more compliant to the original resolution.
Should probably, I mean, if we don't want to change it, then it should be more compliant.
I I prefer the former myself. I
A
don't.
restructure?
Well, I'm not sure that, I think potentially citizen input is great, like we're doing in Hog Creek and you did in Little Northwest Creek. But I don't know about, a standing committee that's going to deal with all kinds of issues that this board might throw to the Harbor Management Committee that they may or may not have any interest in or expertise in.
Well, John, that basically became the issue before. I mean, some of the individuals that we had on Harbor Management Committee were on the committee specific to a project that they had interest in. Once that project had come to fruition, they didn't want to be on the Harbor Management Committee anymore. And I think it seemed to be sort of the norm here is if there was something that you were vested in, you wanted to get involved, and the rest of the stuff you weren't.
It was a finite life cycle to the participation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'd like to kind of take John's point and expand on it for a moment, if I may, just from having the unique perspective of kind of on the outside looking in at the trustees. When I reviewed this resolution, this 2001 resolution, and even the words themselves are kind of powerful and what you're naming it, this sort of, task force, water management task force with appointed personnel from the public and from the town board. It seemed to me like this was the type of committee that would be in place to tackle these sort of long-term hot button topics, whether it's NAPEG dredging or any type of sort of long-term big ticket items. But when I look at the Harbor Management Committee, that's sort of the smaller, just trustee committee, just like all the other committees, there are plenty, and Rick sort of touched on these, there's plenty of day-to-day business, the bi-monthly meetings that still needs to get done and seems to get done very well by the Management Committee. So what question I'm posing to you guys then is, it almost seems like there's two different needs here. There's that day-to-day trustee business need that really doesn't necessarily need a town board member and members of the public to get done this day-to-day business, but also there's these high-level projects that probably could use the benefit from this, this powerful sounding task force. So I don't want to complicate it more, but from my perspective, it seems like we're talking about two different needs.
Well, the project.
How do we address that?
Clear, we have bigger issues and bigger challenges than ever before, and I don't think that's going to change or diminish. So I would agree with you, Chris. Whether it's through one resolution to clean things up or modifying the existing resolution a little bit and creating a second one, but hopefully we could do one resolution that would clean up the operating structure of the committee so it's in line with our documentation.
Yeah, and I think procedurally, either way, I think Francis is right. Procedurally, there needs to be something done to reword, clean this up, and make sure that the management committee is operating the way it was intended to. I just don't see that. It's hard enough to get enough of the personnel together, even once a month, and to try to include and revamp and have the public involved in some of this day-to-day trustee business is going to be a challenge. So I don't know if there's enough work there to have two separate committees or a management committee and then this task force, which is unlike any other committee because it involves these other personnel. But yeah, I think it is two different things we're talking about.
Well, one suggestion I might have is some of these issues that have been thrown or taken by Harbor Management are, as you say, housekeeping issues, like some mooring issues that cross harbors, I think something like that could be handled differently than obviously, Hog Creek dredging or Little Northwest Creek dredging. But, the board, I think, needs to decide what needs to be dealt, what can't be dealt with by the individual harbor committees, what might cross different harbors and be better handled in a larger harbor management type committee, and then directed to that committee or not directed to that committee. And there could be small things and large things. And I don't think they necessarily both have to be handled the same way by that committee. You know, there could be the large things could include representatives from other groups, and the small things could just be dealt with, you know, in a meeting and brought back to the board for resolution.
You know, John, I think you make a good point. You know, bigger projects like environmental dredging, you know, clearly are the task force items. You know, and we saw some smaller things that we talked about at the last Harbor Management Committee, you know, like what to do with moorings that are left in the water over the winter or that have been neglected for a couple of years. It's nice to have a policy that goes across all the mooring areas in different harbors, but it doesn't really involve perhaps public comment, engagement, and a larger lift. But it's still nice to have standard policies so that once that policy exists, you know, Acabana Committee or 3 Mile Committee can handle an issue like that. Right now, I think some of our management plans aren't as complete as they could be, and it's just not clear how to handle some things. So I do think there's some value to harbor management participating on some things until it's documented, then, you know, it can go on autopilot.
I think those things will continue to come up on a regular basis. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, whether it has to be a formal harbor management committee that deals with all these things, or whether the board can say, well, we've got this issue that transcends harbors, let's set up a special ad hoc committee to deal with that issue. I mean, that's another way of dealing with it. Harbor management could be the big picture projects, and then smaller issues like the one you just mentioned about moorings, staying in the water, not staying in the water, could be dealt with on a case-by-case basis by a case-by-case committee.
Yeah,
I guess the reason I'm saying this is because I can see, and I've kind of seen it, almost everything can be thrown to the Harbor Management Committee.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had 7 items. We had 7 items on the agenda the other night, and, you know, it could quickly become 15 items, you know, and it just becomes too much. And like you say, maybe, you know, we can treat it a little differently. So I agree. I don't know if it's the harbor management's responsibility to now try and sort this a little bit and get with Chris and come up with a revised resolution or guideline that helps balance this out a little better, to Francis's earlier point. Or if the clerks want to define a committee to look at it, that's fine too.
A committee to define the committees.
One more thing.
Have a committee committee.
Yeah.
But the
committee
important
choose a
thing is
committee.
that the work is getting done.
Yeah. You know, if you know, so Francis, do you want to define how you would like to see us address this and try to move forward in a more accurate direction?
I'm just concerned about violating the original intention of the committee. That's my biggest concern. Is it possible maybe to have a small group of experts that we can call on occasionally when we get to these larger issues?
Well, we've been doing that.
Yeah, we do that.
But it doesn't have to be monthly meetings, you know? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have the real answer. I understand how it
could we make
these
the next Harbor Management Committee meeting address this, meet with Chris, and try to give some feedback to the board as to an approach to address this? Would that be fair?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if that's okay, we'll put that on the agenda of the next meeting. We'll ask Chris to join as our first expert and see if we can't straighten this out a little bit.
Well, Rick, it seems to me it'd be the easy part, not easy, but the less challenging part is going to be kind of defining a harbor management committee made up of the trustees to handle, like you said, some of the mooring things in the day-to-day management. The larger question mark is really this water management task force made up of personnel across multiple boards. It reminds me of the committee we had set up for Sag Harbor, where we had a membership of different board members from the Sag Harbor community. And I think the downfall of those types of committees is really just the lack of structure and the challenges facing trying to put everybody together on a monthly or whatever type of basis for meetings. They almost just kind of fall to the wayside and you go back to your regular business. So I think it seems like we'll have no problem putting together a resolution to clean up a harbor management committee to do business like all the other committees do. The challenge is going to be what to do about this task force.
I don't think I'm going to be honest, guys. We can freaking come up with a reason to have a meeting for almost anything. And I think we're reaching that point. I don't think there's any need for a task force. I don't think there's any need to basically expand this beyond what it is.
Yeah.
I think anything that the Harbor Management Committee has been dealing with or hasn't been dealing with has come under the umbrella of the other committees or the board in general as the need arised. And anything that elevated itself to the level of a task force, and I'm going to use the example of Deepwater because of its convenience, we would do what we did there. We would appoint a committee specific to that one project, and that committee would report back to the board as general. That committee would engage with professionals, and at the conclusion of whatever it is, well, then there may be no need to continue that particular committee. That to me is the answer on a task force level basis.
The task force, might have completed its mission,
Yeah.
The way the board is functioning, having named individuals makes it really complicated. The trustees with whatever, with input from the public.
But Bill, naming the individuals is timely to the issue. And if by some chance one of the members of that committee either is voted off the board or decides not to run or whatever, then the board as a whole or the clerk will appoint a new member of the committee.
I'm not talking about the Harbor Management Committee.
No, I'm talking about any of these things.
Yeah. Well, the special committee has a finite life cycle, to your point, Jim, and I agree. We evolved, Harbor Management started the Deepwater discussions, and then we had a Deepwater committee and negotiating team that completed it. So to your point, that's exactly what happened, and it was quite successful. And now that's tapering and is completing, and now there are other challenges.
Well, the challenges that will come out of that ultimately are going to be the projects that this board is going to carry forward with the proceeds of that. And I think those individual projects are going to fall in the jurisdictional areas of the individual committees for the board. But I think there's, in all likelihood, going to be similar committees set up for each project as they come along the pike.
Yeah.
So what I see is right now the resolution states that the citizens are appointed to a 3-year term. So I think we have to redefine that, how we're going to use the citizens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more of an expert,
sense?
experts, et cetera. But your point's well taken, Francis. Is it all right if we take this one to committee and come back at the next meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to start the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's important. It was a good point. Thank you. We do have a report. Is it okay if we give a quick report on some of the current smaller items?
Please do.
Great. We had about 6 of them, so I'll just go around between Jim, John, and I, and we'll share them. The first one I'll start with, or actually, John, why don't you start with this one? It was the the demand for moorings are really strong, and you had some thoughts about how to utilize the existing grids before we add more locations. Do you want to talk about that one a little bit? I know you did a lot in setting up the grids.
Yeah, basically we were talking about Babe's Lane, I think, here, and to a lesser degree, Hands Creek. There's a statement in the application, the mooring application, that states that there's only 8 moorings at Babe's Lane. But when we developed the map for the Babe's Lane mooring field a couple of years ago with the IT department, we identified basically 13 sites, some pull moorings and some swing moorings. And I think our conclusion was that we should, I'm not sure where that 8 moorings max came from. Some people feel it came from a previous board. I don't know if it was, how hard and fast it was. It seemed to make it onto the application. But our feeling was that we should leave the mooring field, if you will, at 13 as it's drawn on the map, give out those moorings, and if that becomes a problem, we can ratchet that back in the future.
Right.
And then the Hands Creek, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of swing moorings available. All the pull moorings are gone. I think a lot more people have signed up for a pull mooring for a small boat to access a large boat in the large boat mooring grid. I don't think there's much we can do about that. There's no more room really for pull moorings there. So we'll have to direct people to swing moorings. I think
we were talking about maybe updating some of the other documentation to be in line with the grid maps so everything is consistent. Because some of our instructions for applying still refer to some of the older information. The 2016 instruction write-ups and such.
Yeah, that application, the mooring application that refers to eight moorings maximum at Babe's Lane.
Right.
That'll have to be modified.
Okay, great.
So I guess, I don't know if we, I don't know how this started with the 8, but if we're going to change it to 13, I'll make a motion that we allow up to 13 moorings at Babe's Lane as is characterized on the map.
Is that, if that's a motion, I'll second it.
That's my motion.
I think Francis stepped away, Jim. Could you lead the deliberation?
All in favor? I'm back.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
All right. The next topic real quick was just on the upcoming powering season. We have an open public comment period in progress, which will be closing on May 20th. We will be having a harbor management meeting on the 20th at 5 p.m. For members of the public to weigh in. If they have not had a chance to submit comment, or if they'd like to meet with us to more in person via a Zoom call, help us define the powering season. We had discussed it being any 4 continuous weeks, define the powering map locations, and discuss some things about the seasonal take and reporting and how we might use some data from the season. So these are all things that we'd like to try to wrap up on or about the 20th. And that's the next step in this process. And then, Jim, we have a couple of things over on the crane application on Accabonac Harbor. Would you like to speak to that? Or do you want me to take that one?
Well, I mean, in the crane application, we've gotten a letter from the town, and it really appears, let's face it, This property was CO'd with a different size structure than what is presently there. We've had the applicant's attorney try and basically create the truth that this has always been like this when we know from the previous COs that it's not. And I think what we may want, probably the best way of moving this thing forward or off of our plate is to invite the attorney or agent for this applicant to come to a future meeting, present the case on this, and we've got to vote on it. Okay, we've got to come to a consensus as to the legality and the legitimacy of this structure. And if it is a legitimate structure, to the size of the structure. I mean, this is something that was replaced and redone less than a year ago with no permits. I don't know what was there before. Okay, the only thing I have to go by is looking at some older aerials, which are a little cloudy, and looking at an older C of O, which described dimensionally this thing, which does not match the dimensions that are there presently.
Right, and we have a trustee permit for what appears to be a floating dock only, without any pier or piling structure. And I think we also have a request for a mooring permit. So,
Yeah.
Those two can, we should also review with them.
I think the applicant should speak to exactly what they're looking for here.
Fair
And,
enough.
And I'd like to point out, this is before code enforcement to grapple with the issues of accessing this dock from what appears to be public property, not the private property of the owner.
Right, and there was a pretty strong letter written by the town on this matter that I believe the applicant has received. So it's still complicated. We may need Chris's help on this one too.
well, hey, Chris, I was going to ask you to look over. You've read that letter that we've gotten from the town's council, correct?
I don't have it in front of me, but I have read it.
Okay, this is something I think we should have a private conversation about, come to some consensus. But I do think that this is something that is ultimately best aired in a public forum so that the public understands what's at stake here and what's being asked for.
Okay. Jim, would you like me to reach out to the applicant, or should Chris reach out?
No, I have no problem doing that. I spoke to their counsel the other day, and given that they have an attorney handling this, is no reason for us to reach out to the homeowner directly.
Great, thank you. And
But I just, are we going to talk to our attorney first? Are we going to bring them into this?
Well, I think we need to, Chris, you and I, maybe if you want to jump on the call with the three of us, let's come up to speed on this. Let's have a discussion. But I think this is something that's best aired in a public forum at some point.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm always available.
Right.
thanks, Jim.
May I add to this? It's also been brought to my attention that there are several other unpermitted docks in that area. And we also know there's some in Hog Creek and in other harbors.
Right.
Do we want to consider doing an inventory at some point?
Well, we actually, Francis, Arlene and Allison have been pecking away at an inventory, and yes, I think that's very important. I think it's very important on Georgia. I think it's important on some of these other water bodies because, as these docks multiply, at what point, we just tabled an application for a dock that they followed every rule.
Mm-hmm.
They came to us with a prospectus for a permit. They got their DEC permits. They went through all of the processes, and the consensus of our board was that we weren't ready to issue a permit for a dock. And if we're allowing these illegal docks to exist. I think what we've done is validated the idea of an illegal dock.
Right, I agree.
I agree too, and I think this is an awful big job. And I think it needs to be subdivided out and assigned to certain people to look at either certain harbors or portions of certain harbors. It's going to take a little time, but I think the first step is to
Well, you're going to
not
take
just send it back to one committee, but to try to break this up into workable chunks.
Yeah.
It's a good point, John.
Well, I don't know. I honestly, Rick, I thought this was something that you'd take on and do all of them.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Well-
I've got my little jet boat. I'm gonna zip around and visit everything. All right, that one's gonna be continued at our next meeting. Just last but not least, these leftover moorings, we talked about that, and sometimes, people had a permit, the house sells, there was COVID, they didn't come out to use the house, and these moorings have sat in the water. It was the opinion of the group that was on the committee meeting that we're not looking to necessarily reject the permits, but we would like to make sure the moorings are safe. And that if they've been in the water over the winter or longer, that a marine contractor should probably take a look at them. And if they need to put in a new section of chain or new shackles or new dropper lines, they should be looked at, and we get an email or an invoice from the contractor saying the mooring checks out, and they can submit that with their application to renew their permit. So I just wanted to bring that up to the board, that was the thought of the committee, that we want these moorings to be safe, and we want them to be permitted, not illegal, like the docks we were just referring to.
Honestly, I don't think that that's something that really this board as a whole needs to have a motion and vote on. This is something that really Arlene and staff can take care of with a little direction.
Okay, very good. And then we have the bigger discussion, on future dock applications like the McGinn application, but we're not ready. We have a couple ideas we're kicking around, but we have nothing to report back yet. But I know we did promise the McGinn team that we would get back to them. So this will be on our next Harbor Management Committee meeting, and I hope we can give at least some feedback to the board by the next meeting. We are trying to meet before the next meeting, just because we have so much stuff on the plate right now. So that was the last item that I had. John, I don't know if you guys had anything else, but that was the gist of the last meeting.
No, I don't have anything else.
And we were going to talk a little bit more about in multi-uses like the kelp, like the possible sanctuaries, and maybe other types of aquaculture that's been kind of kicked around. So we have a pretty full agenda for harbor management. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Lazy Point Napeag, a request from Louis E. Havel, 50% leaseholder of 160 Shore Road, lot number 36N in Lazy Point, to transfer his 50% ownership of the lease that he shares with his daughter, Kimberly A. Coletti, to his son, Edward R. Havel. Edward has submitted his paperwork verifying he is a resident of the town of East Hampton. Have you looked at that at all, Chris?
Yes, everything appears to be in order on this one. I think we're good to go. Arlene, we do have the publication requirement completed, I believe.
Yes,
Other
we
than that,
do.
Yeah,
Yes.
so there's
I
nothing left.
received it. The East Hampton Star affidavit was dropped off. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, everything's in order on this one. And time for the trustees to move forward.
Want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve this.
A second.
For a second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Next is the website. We have a proposal for the management and administration of the trustee website received and distributed from Michael Hansen. Has anybody had a chance to look at that?
Yeah, it's a good proposal. It's, I'm not going to say expensive, but it definitely is a proposal that I think should demonstrate some real hands-on participation by our consultant. It is the first year of an advanced, powerful website, and I think it does warrant some expertise to help our administrative staff get up to speed and really keep it fresh. And that was, I think, one of the failures of the original site we put up 5-6 years ago, is we didn't have as much participation from the consultant as we probably needed. And, I'm hoping in the future we won't have as big a lift financially for support. But for the first year, I would have to say I think it makes sense if we're going to make the site really successful.
Yeah, I don't know how to evaluate this personally. I would just echo what Rick said, that if we're going to spend this money to have this, our staff be brought into this process and understand how to work this thing, I would like to see that ultimately, continue and allow us to operate this website as much as we can on our own in the long run.
What was the original price of the site? Was it around $5,000?
I don't have
No,
that in
it
front of
was
me.
actually, I will jump in. I think he even charged less than John Monteleone did 4 years ago. It was like $32.50, very similar.
Right.
But
No.
he's doing things that we can't do. I mean, he just put up paperwork for the DEC, the whole Georgia management plan. I mean, I don't even know where to begin to do the kind of technology. We're not just uplifting PDFs and posting them like we used to. It's definitely,
No, it's another level
expanding.
I agree with you. My point was that the support agreement is more than the purchase price of the site. So, it's fair, like I said, in the first year, because we're still really fully implementing the site and training, and it takes time. It's not always easy, and other people are better at technology. That's why he's a consultant. But I don't know if we can spend more than the purchase price of the site every year on maintenance. So I think that we, need to consider that going forward. But I think
An original proposal was broken down by month and by a very modest number. I don't know, 2 or 3 hours a week or something to by hour. So if you want to take your calculators and start, even divide by 52 weeks and see how much we're paying him for. I mean, believe me, he gets a ton of phone calls and posts and videos and everything every week.
Right.
Maybe 40, 50, 60 emails.
I hear, I'm sure he
Divide
does.
it by 52 weeks and that'll give you an idea of what you're dealing with.
See,
We know.
I think it's a new website. It's going to require a little more maintenance the first year, I believe, and it's going to take a while for our staff to learn how to use it. So I'm fine with doing it for this year and see what kind of time it requires and go from there next year.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that, because not for nothing. We did this a number of years ago, and I'm going to be straight. It fell right on its face. Nobody did anything with this website. We had stuff that was on there that literally was years old, things that would change. Nobody ever followed up on this thing. Here we've got an individual who actually actively set up the site. Susan has been working on this nonstop, and it shows. And right now, yes, it's an expense because work is actually being done on it. I would support what's, the billing. The billing, I think, is going to be what it is for a while.
Yeah. I'd make a motion to approve the proposal for this year, and we'll see where we go after this year.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Second.
One quick thing, I think we have to analyze the traffic. We have to look at the traffic that's on this site and who's looking at it. Are we at 5 people a day, 50 people a day, 500 people a day? So I think, and maybe we can get that out of the first year, like that should be a requirement of what we're asking and paying for, is that give us some reports on tracking and is anyone using the site? And then we can decide.
Yeah, I was going to make that point also, but I think that's part of his proposal. I think that's one thing he he wrote in that proposal that he would be doing. And I don't know how many people look.
Great.
So
I think that's,
Right.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Move on to administrative, payment of the bills. Optimum, $152.58. East Hampton Business Service, $368.22 for printing of the Georgia Management Plan. Drew Bennett, engineer, $907.13 for modification of the DEC permit for the Gerard Drive culvert. Riverhead Building Supplies, $210.41 for materials for the kayak racks. Seacoast Enterprises, $6.79 pump out boat. Do I have a motion to pay the bills?
Make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Financials for the month ended April 30th, 2021. Anyone have a chance to look at that?
I took a look at them and had a lot of questions. Actually, I went over all my questions with Arlene, and she explained to me the difference between last year and this year. So I'm satisfied with it. I'll make a motion that we accept the financials for April.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And report of the clerk. All I have is I want to thank you guys for taking over, for when I was out. I really appreciate it. You did a great job. Thank you.
Good to have you back, Francis.
Yeah, we're good.
Thanks.
I'm glad to see you back, Francis.
Thanks.
You're looking good. You're looking
All right.
healthy.
Anybody have anything else before we go?
Motion
Is there a
to
motion to
close?
close?
Motion to close.
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great
Alrighty.
evening.
Good night.
Good night.